Yeah, I didn't realise we can get that in 10, 15 minutes. You're a pro. I mean, good luck with good luck to Andy.
Yeah.
All right, well, as I've already introduced myself, my name's Andy Paul. I am the founder and CEO of Fliweel.tech. Just a bit of background about who I am personally. So my experience is in data science and tech consulting. So I've had about 12 plus years. Spent a bit of time in London, also consulted to technology companies, having lived in San Francisco for about 6 years, where we were able to provide consulting advice to very large tech companies that you can think of that are in the Silicon Valley area, banks as well as fast-growing startups as well. Fliweel was almost like a side project of mine, if I'm very honest, very entrepreneurial in terms of my background, and as part of being a bit of a techie, as you can tell, I did discover that I could automate some of the tasks in the consulting firm. So I started to build very low code, no code workflows to automate those tasks. It was really interesting for me because it was not really the job that I was doing, consulting to tech, but really that was a starting point for Fliweel, where I was really interested in trying to cut cost time for the consulting firm. And when I returned back in 2021 to the UK, I launched Fliweel, which was really to help double down on this real big gap that a lot of businesses really experience, which is trying to automate some of the fat in the organization that takes a lot of time, all the grunt work in terms of back office operations. And then along came AI last year, and ChatGPT made a name for itself, even though AI has been around for a very, very long time. And really, I was very interested in how my experience in data science can tie very nicely or complement the automation services that we provided. And so really, it's an automation and AI consultancy. So we've talked about ChatGPT. We'll probably talk about it for the rest of the day. But why is it really important? ChatGPT was a really interesting moment for a lot of society, I'd say, and some people would argue the next industrial revolution, believe it or not. But AI is really making a name for itself because of ChatGPT. And what we've actually shown here is just a diagram or a chart just to describe the number of days it took for these different applications to reach 1 million users. So if we start at the bottom here, you'll see Netflix took around 13 to 1400 days to reach 1 million users. And then if we go up the list, we have Airbnb at 800-900, Facebook at maybe 500 or 300-400, and then you see ChatGPT, and that reached approximately 5 days. And so it really made a name for itself because of its very, very high rate of adoption. And so a lot of organizations, and personally, I think people are trying to think about what on earth is ChatGPT and why is it a very, very hot topic in industry, and also how can it be used in my personal life as well. So this was a really powerful moment for the tech industry and a lot of people in business to think about how we can double down. May I just ask the audience, if you just raise your hand, who has used this technology, ChatGPT? Great. And then who has not, just out of interest? Okay, so a couple of people. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it. It's free, and there is a free version and a paid version, and it has a very versatile set of questions that you can ask it, and it will get you not all the way there in terms of asking and prompting things around sort of contracting, proposals, maybe completing an email, but also in your personal life, maybe you want to actually book a trip and create an itinerary. Maybe you want to write a personal email or a letter to your family member. It does a very good job in terms of its versatility, and it will get you about 80-90% of the way there. I wouldn't say it will take you all the way there, and that's where human in the loop or somebody being able to review it is still a critical factor in that. Okay, so I've listed here just kind of describing the different types or common types of AI, and broken it down into sort of 5 different areas. AI is a bit blurry in the way that it can be categorized, but on the left we've got kind of, I would say, the least intelligent. This is rule-based robotic process automation, And this is really about automating processes, data entry, automating certain tasks. Then we have speech recognition, and so this is things or use cases where you're actually thinking about command control, transcription. You may have used tools where, or you've started to see maybe in your YouTube videos, videos being actually transcribed. Then we have vision recognition, and so that's really the use case for that is in the context perhaps for security authentication, or even interacting or identifying. Data science, which is more about using data to make prediction. Much of this technology is about data, but there are cases where you can use corpuses of data or large corpuses of data to really predict behavior from a data set. And then lastly, generative AI. And so this is kind of in the context of ChatGPT where that would fit, where you can use it to create content, data simulation, and even perhaps recommend different products or services. So that's kind of a bit about AI, but really I think a lot of businesses are thinking about what does it mean for my business or my organization. And so what I've done here is I've pulled a few stats on the impact of using or adopting AI within your business. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, said that AI will affect almost 40% of jobs around the world, with up to 60% of jobs affected in advanced countries. So in developed countries, you might see that there will be, a very large proportion, or even perhaps 4 out of 5 jobs affected due to AI. And that's a huge amount. That's something that you should be actually thinking about. Sorry, not 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5. And that's a very, very large proportion of jobs that will be affected as a result of AI. But really, what is the actual revenue impact, and what is the implications from a revenue perspective when you adopt AI within the organization? And so IBM carried out a survey across a number of different organizations and really tried to numerically describe the impact on revenue as you increase your maturity level in adopting AI within your organization. So when you go from adopting AI from a piloting perspective, when you're just thinking about piloting AI, you could see around 4% increase in revenue, then through to implementing where you see 7%, operating at 10%, and then optimizing at 11.5% in terms of your revenue. So there is a direct correlation there in, adopting AI within your organization. And as you mature, you'll start to see those investments come to fruition. So that's a bit about the business case. What I wanted to do is touch on use cases, so actual tangible use cases where we can think about where AI really could help the back office. And when we think about certain use cases, there are 4 or 5 different functions here that are displayed on this slide. We've got IT on the top right hand side, where you could potentially talk through chatbots, ticket classification. In marketing, content creation is probably the most popular one today. In finance, we could use PO or invoice processing, as well as forecasting. HR, we could use AI to screen resumes, or even predict turnover in an organization. And then from a sales perspective, propensity to buy, which is the likelihood that somebody might make a purchase. And so we're going to dive into 2 or 3 of these examples in the next couple of slides, so you can kind of understand how we actually go about doing that. Okay, so here we have a case study of a popular online fashion retailer struggling to increase its conversion rates. And so what it's what this organization or this retailer is looking to do is increase its sales. It knows it has a large customer base, but it's really unsure how to leverage the data from that to improve its sales. So how do you use this data really to deploy a model to help streamline some of the decisions? So here we have a propensity to buy model, which is really about building a model to predict the likelihood or conversion that a person on the website is likely to purchase a product. So really we start with the outcome, and so this is a purchase or conversion event. Then we look at the data, so we look at things like purchase history, customer demographics, browsing history, and then we move into model development. And so this is where we get a little bit more technical in trying to understand and cleaning, well, in terms of cleaning the data, building a set of predictions, as well as modeling and measuring the performance of a model. After you select that model, we go into this deploy phase and integrate that actually into the business. But lastly, and most importantly, we go back to sort of the business case, which is categorizing those audiences and offer those products targeted to the specific audience. And so you can imagine there, you've got a set of products, you've got a 0 or 100% likelihood and against each potential customer, and you can have a very, very targeted marketing campaign out of the result of the AI predictions and the propensity to buy for each of those prospective clients or users on the website. So that's sales. Let's take customer support. So imagine you're a non-profit providing aid to people in need. You receive a large number of donors, inquiries from donors, volunteers, or people in need of assistance. So you implement an AI-powered chatbot on the website to provide self-service support to their users. And here, the objective is to reduce processing time. I'll pause on the topic of chatbot. Chatbot is probably something we've all engaged with for the most part, right, on a website. There's generally two types of chatbots. The first is a rule-based chatbot, which you may have clicked through and then found the corner of the chatbot, and then you kind of pass on to a real person to actually deal with your problem. And that can be quite frustrating because sometimes you think that's a real conversational chatbot. It's really a rule-based chatbot. But then you've actually got conversational chatbots, which are AI-driven, where you can ask it and type very natural language, just as you might be in a chatbot, ChatGPT, for example, and it will return a fairly natural response back to and understand the context of your question. So those are two types of chatbots, rule-based and an AI conversational powered chatbot. But just coming back to this example around customer support and reducing processing time for this particular organization or non-profit, one way we can think about using AI is really through a ticket classification problem. So in the previous slide we had, if I just go back, we had three types of inquiries, one from donors, the second from volunteers, and the third from people in need of assistance. And so when we think about this ticket classification, this is about trying to triage those inquiries to those different respective teams. So you have three teams: the donors, the volunteers, and the people in need. So again, when we think about the outcome, what is the business need or the organization's priority or objective? We want to reduce processing time of these inquiries. And then we move on to the collection. So we look at the description or the textual context of the inquiry. We then look at, through a model, we understand its sentiment. Sentiment meaning maybe somebody's writing urgent, need your help. That's you need to respond to that much faster than something that may seem lower priority. And then we look at the nature of the context using natural language processing or NLP to classify the type of inquiry. Once we've deployed that, which is really an assessment of the best performing model, we integrate that perhaps into a web inquiry form. That's one example. We could put it in other places. And eventually, the last stage is really about auto-routing. So this is really triaging or auto-routing to the right, one of the three teams that we've just discussed. So if it's an inquiry about somebody that's really urgently in need, then we can send it to the support person that can be on the ground to help. Or if it's somebody that's interested in donating, then we send it to the fundraising team. So this is another example. Hopefully it brings to life a use case for AI in an organization. And then lastly, we'll go through this really quickly, but this is more about document processing. So in document processing, this is really about trying to extract information from a document. And Matt, you talked a bit about this as well. How do you extract data from perhaps a company that receives large volumes of purchase orders, maybe in a PDF format, and employees are currently manually picking out the data, right? So you've got a document you're picking out, somebody's in your team, and they're constantly copying, pasting data from one system to another or out of that PDF into a spreadsheet. And so how can you reduce the cost or the burden from your team to remove that manual process? So this is what we call intelligent document processing, where you can use AI to essentially convert PDFs into structured data sets, and you can process that data straight into, in this case, an invoice, or into Xero or QuickBooks as an example. So again, we start with our business outcome. We want to reduce document processing costs. It takes us a massive amount of time for our organization to extract data from these documents. And then we take those documents and we read them or pass them into let's say a doc reader, which learns the contents of the document, and you identify the various aspects of the document that you'd like to extract. Once the model is trained, we can then transpose that data into a structured table, maybe that's in a spreadsheet, and you pull in the respective rates of whether that's product, quantity, pricing, etc., etc. And then from this structured table, we will then go to generating the invoice, and this is more about automatically generating that invoice, and creating those specific, flowing through the data for that specific invoice. But then lastly, and this is one really important piece here, because we're extracting data using AI, is really reviewing and approving it. And so that human in the loop is really important. That I think a lot of people think AI is there to replace your jobs. It's not. It's actually there to enhance. And if you embrace it and continue to look over the results of the AI results, you always have a person in the loop, a human in the loop, to review and approve the process. And so in this case, you'd actually review the invoice, make sure that what you've scanned from your original PDF is actually captured within your final output. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so on that note, we talked about human in the loop, really a critical factor. There are really important factors here that we need to think about in terms of the risks of AI. I think a lot of people have thought about AI in how it could help, but there's some areas that it could not help, and you've got to be mindful of how you use that. So one problem is that it could provide inaccurate feedback, and so thinking about hallucination, which is the idea that Matt talked about, where you've got an output, it's actually just extracted, responded in a way that appears to be right, but actually you can fact check it. So ensuring that you've got somebody in the loop that is actually checking that it's fully accurate is really important. Lack of personal touch. So I don't know if about you, but when I use AI or ChatGPT, sometimes you might find that it's a bit robotic, and so ensuring that you are there to review the nature or the tone of that writing can cause issues, because then you would suddenly, if you are sending the extract from a ChatGPT response to your client, they might, you can tell almost when a piece of text is being constructed by an AI rather than a person. Another classic example is in the schooling system. If you've got kids writing essays and suddenly you see a very, very professionally written, well-written piece of content, and that somebody else has written that, or an AI has written that, and not your child or a student. Over-reliance is also a problem as well. So I think a lot of organizations have actually thought about using AI, but I think sometimes we might get lazy if we're honest with ourselves. And so we need to continue to monitor those outputs. And the last two are about the data. And so data privacy is really critical. You really need to be mindful of what data you're passing into some of these public chatbots or AI tools. So ensuring that you are aware of the data that you're passing through, and that you've got controls in place to ensure that you're not feeding data to sensitive data to these systems that are training on those models is really important. And then unintentional bias is more about the continuous auditing of these models to ensure that there is no bias, or there is an understanding of the bias that the model has been trained on. Okay, we're starting to wrap up. I will finish off the last couple of slides. Why do AI projects fail? I think a lot of people are interested in the topic. Some people have, even in the networking this morning, were thinking about the Terminator showing up, and that's kind of some people are genuinely scared, and frightened by the idea of AI replacing their jobs. That's kind of almost the number one fear. And the second reason is the ethics around AI, right? I'm passing it my personal data. What's it going to do with my data? Where is my data going? The other piece is around the lack of necessary data foundation. So you may have the great idea of trying to predict the propensity to buy in that use case, but you may not have the right data for it. And so understanding the data sets that you have is really important as well. And lastly, it's about failure to connect the AI initiative to a business problem. AI is a brand new shiny thing, like most technology as it comes through in its cycles. It's another shiny thing, but actually you want to start with the business problem before you start thinking about AI. And sometimes AI is not actually the solution. It might just be a case of automation, and AI is a potential add-on to that, or may complement it. And so always starting with the business problem is always the key and what we'd recommend. So as I've said, where do we begin as an organization in terms of deploying AI? Start with a business outcome, not data. Be open-minded. So as you think about AI, it can be overwhelming. So there's a lot of content online. There's a few of us around here that can also talk to it as well. But be open-minded as the possibility of a problem that you've identified and saying, this is manual, this is taking me a long time, can AI do this, solve this problem, or is there a use case for it? And then we always recommend starting small and then scaling. The worst thing you could do is spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds, or millions of pounds into an organization on a very large deployment of AI. But we recommend always piloting it just to create a testing ground for the new technology that you're implementing. So that's the end of the content. This is a little bit about Fliweel. We've helped schools, retail stores, online, non-profits in the space of strategy and implementation of AI, RPA, integration and chatbots, as well as upskilling businesses. So if you have any questions, now's the time, or you can speak to me afterwards. Any questions? Yes?
You mentioned unintentional bias.
Yep.
What would you suggest are the things to look out for? What are the main causes for that when you're building a model?
Yeah, I think representation. So let's say you are in a manufacturing site that might be, and you're using data in it. I think understanding the sample and the manufacturing example. Let's just say there's 90% males in the manufacturing warehouse, let's just say, and you're trying to predict a certain outcome, knowing your population that you're trying to experiment on, and ensuring there's a diverse range of people that you're predicting on is kind of one example where you would want to understand before you build predictions on there. So representation, diverse. It will. There's a term called overfitting, which is where you might want to, where you've actually got data sets, you're trying to predict on it and you're overcorrecting, and then there's undercorrecting, which is you don't have enough sample, or that's underfitting as well. So in simple terms, happy to kind of double click into that.
I think if you think about the underlying model, there's a lot of training that's done on internet-based content, and there's a lot of communities, languages, areas of the world that are very unrepresented in that base data. So if you're using the model for translation, then you can get biased output that way.
A lot of false information as well.
Yeah.
Well, how much time do we have?
You've got plenty of time.
Great. Yes.
Can you give any insight or examples of, probably going back to Matt's point about the answer is that this contract does fulfil our procurement standards, but yes it does, no it doesn't. At a sort of leadership level, can you provide any insight as to how AI can help decision making, confirming business strategies, that type of thing?
So you're saying, could you kind of double click on that a bit, describe that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Say you're a CEO,
Yep.
and you've got to make quite a big decision
Yep.
about something. Can you give any insight or examples of how AI can help you do that? What do you have to do to kind of prove that out?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really broad question to say how can you use AI to help a leader in an organization, and I think it comes down to the business problem first. So we can get as broad and use AI in so many different ways, and we'll have a little session on another tool called Microsoft Copilot. But there's also I genuinely think that the way at least it works for us is actually trying to get very specific on a use case and saying, okay, I'm having maybe employee turnover issue, I have attrition issue in my organization. How can we build a model to predict and solve for that, or at least stay ahead of that? And so if I'm able to identify the attrition problem and I can say, like, Matt is about to leave the organization, how can I retain that? And so it comes back to the objective of the business, because otherwise what we'll be doing is just saying AI, but not really going to a business problem. So I'd like to kind of advise my clients that they need to think about the business problem rather than just trying to throw AI at the problem or money at the problem, which is not necessarily always the case. Yeah.
On the definition of affected on 60% of businesses will be affected by AI, it's quite a negative headline, and one of the biggest fears of people is AI interrupting with recruitment. The definition of affected in that, because surely 100% of businesses can benefit from AI,
yep.
Correct?
Yep.
So just the definition of affected.
Yeah, I think the idea is that it will touch, the many roles, and 60% affected in the developed nations, right? I can certainly kind of point you to the finding there, but you're absolutely right. It's going to affect almost every industry, right? Most industries, and in a positive way, if you embrace it positively, not think about it like it's a Terminator, right? And yeah, affecting it could be in a small capacity, or a very large capacity, but it's down to ultimately the open-mindedness of an organization to say, hey, you know what, AI is there, I want to embrace that, or I'm going to just leave it there. And but the reality is, if we're not, at least my opinion, if you're not embracing it, you will be at the back of the line, and you will start to discover that your workforce is not as productive as maybe your competitors. So it's really important it's there to show you and tell a story that there is going to be impact, and are you actually thinking about AI in your organization?
I think it was on your sales slide, your process on the sales slide, where you talk about the need to clean data.
Yep.
And I just wondered if there's any research around the value in putting a lot of effort into cleaning the data before it goes into the training model versus letting the power of the foundational model handle rookie data.
Yep.
Where's the balance of the return on investment?
Yeah. So cleaning data is really important. There's this term called garbage in, garbage out. So if you put rubbish data into a model, you will get rubbish results, right? And this kind of comes back to maybe ChatGPT and some of the examples we saw where it kind of hallucinates. Because it's scraped the internet, there's so much information that it's accounting for. It's not actually fine-tuned, or it's not. We aren't narrowing down on the data set that is focused on, in this case, customer data. And so some of the problems that could happen is that the data is incomplete. Maybe you've got blank fields, customer name or industry. Somebody's fat-thumbed the wrong data into the wrong field, right? Those kind of nuances are really critical at the beginning of an exercise where you're doing something like a propensity model, so that you can have a high-performing model. Because again, if you start putting in bad data, you will start getting bad results. So it's absolutely important and imperative that you know what data you're feeding before you start making predictions on it. Otherwise, you will get poor results at the end of it.
Into structuring and cleaning the data.
Correct.
Before it goes into training model.
In that kind of example, yes. Yeah. Hey, Ben.
Question really about diversity and biases as well. So I had a thought a while ago about, if we keep using AI, we're just using it, we're not giving it more information, we're not creating more information. So when is it going to get to a point where all the things that are coming back are things that are already created years ago, and how we teach it new things that we can create new content,
Yeah.
actually it continually learns new stuff. Because if we stop creating,
Yep.
we're using more AI.
Yep.
when does it get to a point where it feathers off and you don't get more new stuff?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a really good question. So the question, for those that may have not heard, how do you create new content in a world where you're using old content generated by AI? Old, but like you scrape data from the internet from 2021. I think that's when the data which the current ChatGPT model that many the free model uses. Yeah, it's a really good point. How do we create new content in a world where we're using AI to predict or create content on potentially old? AI technology has started to scrape current as well, first and foremost. So some of the technology has scraped old data, but now we've moved to a place where it can look at live internet information. So you can actually prompt tools like ChatGPT to go to a current news article from yesterday, right? It's very expensive to maintain those models, and we had some numbers there on trying to train a large language model, a model like that ChatGPT technology sits on, is very, very expensive. I think there will be a place where there will be a time where those models will get continued to be up-trained, but ultimately, as content creators, I think the New York Times is in a massive legal dispute with OpenAI right now because they're scraping their website, and the New York Times is actually a paywall website, so you have to subscribe. And so there's a lot of content providers that are questioning how can we actually monetize on our content as well. I think it's probably a space that I will continue to follow. It still continues to move, and I think some of my content I presented about 6 months ago became stale. We'll wait and see. But yeah, that's kind of the new technology is starting to scrape current sites on a prompt basis.
I think for me as well, it's also the art, design, creative.
Yeah.
Where, say, Adobe, obviously, creative.
Absolutely.
And actually go copyright issues, all of this.
Yeah.
No one's creating new bits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just yesterday, I posted this on LinkedIn yesterday. Sora, OpenAI's new product called Sora. You prompt it and say, make a video, this world, this context, this background, and now you can make 60-second videos in the OpenAI module. It's pretty wild because now you're questioning kind of, no offense, but your videography teams, right? And all your content and the whole of marketing are probably losing themselves and thinking, this is going to replace our jobs. It's not going to replace your jobs. It's going. You just, as an agency, you need to embrace it. That's the reality of it. And there's going to be parts where AI gets it right, and it will also get it wrong as well.
Can I add a point to that?
Yeah.
With AI, you've got something called a context window, which is the amount of information that you can put in your question and the amount of information that comes out from the model, the total amount. And that's not that big at the moment. I mean, it may change, but the problem with that is that models don't really have a memory about the conversation. You're constantly feeding the same information to it with a new question, and it's giving you the information back in a slightly different form. What that means is that if you're trying to write a book, for example, that's hundreds of pages long, the AI model doesn't have any concept of the entire storyline. You need a human involved in that loop to string everything together to make it into a story. And that's not going to go away very quickly just because of the costs of the computational costs for all of this.
Yep.
So I run a professional services business. In a hypothetical world where I've got a really cynical board, what would your response be to that question from those cynics to say that's all of this sounds great but really expensive?
That's a really good question because there's late adopters and early adopters, right? And so there's a certain mindset that people have to change to embrace this stuff. Otherwise, you'll be behind yourself as an organization. I think showing value through pilot is the quickest, easiest, cheapest way to do it, if I'm very honest. And that's the only way. I think there's also free tools like ChatGPT as well, where you can show that as an example. It doesn't cost the business any money, just their time to see its value. As an entry point to say, look, these tools exist now. Here is a use case where we can simply reduce all this effort We can get you 80% of the way there, 70% of the way there. Our staff still need to review it, human in the loop, right? And that's I guess a free way, not trying to get us out of work, but that is the best way. And then piloting is probably the next phase of that. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Probably add on that as well that access to these tools is the cheapest it's ever been.
Yes.
And I suspect it's only going to get cheaper.
Exactly.
A lot of the expensive stuff we've talked about is the training of the models in the first place.
Yeah.
For use cases in your business, the chances are there's a solution out there that might not be turnkey, but it might do the bulk of the work, and they've already put in that investment.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be expensive.
Hello.
Data. More and more that data gets corrupted, even just with regular use data gets corrupted in when you PC. Who controls the data sets in these models and this AI technology? Because who's to say that's not influenced? Who controls it ultimately? It's the internet. Nobody has control of the internet. Nobody has control of the dark web. We talk about the internet and resources. That's where it scrapes. But there's rubbish out there as well as good stuff.
Yeah.
So where are the constraints? Who's got the control?
Yep.
That's the bigger picture for me. Is it's all very well to talk about these data sets and data models, but where's it coming from?
Yeah, there is a whole topic about AI policy, transparency going on right now, the UK, US, and many other countries, about regulating and being transparent about where is the data, what does it look like, and is it safe to use, and where are the guardrails or the boundaries or confines of that data. As this topic continues to evolve, regulation is starting to and will continue to be enforced. And some of the key themes are around transparency. Where's the data, right? What is the data? Where does it come from? Where is the bias, if there is any bias? I think somebody asked that question, right? And so transparency is probably going to become is already a big topic and will continue to be. And so a lot of these AI models right now will tell you there are certain parts where they are just transparent about where it's come from, where is it being stored, what the data has been trained on, and what's the context of it.
I'm all for working kind of smarter rather than harder, and for automating mundane repetitive tasks. Why wouldn't you do that? And the skill then really becomes in the prompts, it's asking the questions to get the piece of data back and also put the data in. Reassurance from a kind of control perspective, I remember being back here when Aiimi held a summit, obviously the Western Summit. Mm-hmm. And the one question I didn't ask at the time, which I now regretted, and I didn't want to seem like I was being negative, but it's been burning in the back of my mind since, is we talk about regulation, but we can't even control the dark web. So, we can't control what's out there already, never mind what's to come.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this from a negative perspective, I'm very pro-AI.
Yep.
But it is one of my fears.
Yep.
Is, there are people out there that won't use it for the benefit of the good and the benefit of the many. There are people out there that will use it in a bad way. I watched a program recently about a pharmaceutical company in the States, and they put into it all this data about creating a new drug with the least toxicity.
Yep.
And they did it, and they achieved it. They came up with this new drug that was kind of minimal side effects, etc. Being digital, you change a 0 to a 1, and it created the most lethal drug in the world, worse than Novichok, worse than Sarin, worse than all this other stuff that you've got. So it's that power and that control that does concern me, because let's face it, it's only going to, the adoption take up, like you said, this thing's moving at a pace nobody can even envisage.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking about AI policy in the education sector at Bedford Modern School a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about in the schooling system, right? Using AI, I think I may have called it out, in your write-ups, right, in your homework, and how do you create guardrails, how do you create controls? I don't think right now, let's face it, I think our legal system is probably a little bit slower than AI. AI has moved, exponentially compared to how the pace at which we're moving regulation. And so, it's my duty to ensure that those risks are always continue to be displayed and made aware of to organizations that are dabbling in AI. It's going to be a topic that's going to, by the time we get regulation, we'll probably get another version of one of these tools that are going to probably do far beyond or faster, powerful, quicker, and cheaper tasks than regulation comes out. But one of the key things I would say is be transparent, always have people in the loop to review that data, and know where your data is being processed as well. So when you're thinking about feeding in data, know that you know where that data is being processed if it's being processed. I'd also say there are models out there that are open, right, where you can feed it data, it will learn from it. But then there are closed, right? So you've got your own in-house model almost, and that's your guardrail. You've got almost your own instance where you know that your data will not be processed anywhere else or go anywhere else as well. Yep. Hi.
Just perhaps join a couple of threads together and move with Ben's point about sort of the positive feedback loop that needs to happen for the models to grow. What's your thoughts on, as individuals, we're told to be very careful with our data and to lock it down as much as possible, but we need to reveal more data about ourselves for the models to become more useful. And if I might throw in a practical example, I have a very common surname, Smith. My wife's a writer, so she is out there on the internet. She shares her name with an MP. That's interesting when we phone up for insurance. We always get a couple of extra questions. A religious podcaster from the States, and a woman involved in the adult entertainment industry. So you can imagine the potential for exciting and predictable results from that rather ridiculous example, but I hope to make the point. So what's your thoughts on squaring that circle of holding onto our data, but revealing it and opening it to make the models useful?
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, right? You want to use tools that have scraped the internet. Your information is on the internet because you want to promote whatever writing services you have, but then suddenly it's being used, whatever the output from the AI has given has then given wrong information, right, or misleading or the wrong data. It's something that I think we need to be mindful of. Firstly, context windows are really important as well. Maybe you want to you tell the AI be more specific. So this comes into this realms of prompting the right things. I'm looking for a writer with this name, Smith, rather than saying tell me all the people in these that have the last name Smith in certain industries. So that context is really important. But yeah, it's also something that we have to be mindful of because it is inevitable that you will get hallucination or results that could be misleading. Yeah. Hey.
You're right. I think a lot of the base level models are actually trained on Americanized data.
Yep.
So you tend to find a lot of things which come out, say, the American way of spelling things like organization with a Z and so on. Right? So yeah, definitely, Martin, your point is a really good one. Where does the data come from? Because it's not localized or specifically regionalized. Okay. And same thing as you, Phil. Because you have to have sort of like an open set of data in order for the large language models to be trained.
Where will that point be?
Yeah. So I think GDPR is actually quite restrictive in that sense because we won't be able to train these large language models on UK-based data. So there's a balance to be struck somewhere.
Yep.
Might be more of a question for Matt, but in terms of experimenting with those free tools out there, just to get an understanding, from that piloting, you mentioned ChatGPT a lot, and the limitations it has in terms of the date range. If you put in who won the FIFA World Cup in 2022, it will say that hasn't taken place yet. What about looking at the other options out there? Like I like Qoob, for example, and there's Bard, and there's Being Like AI. Do
just focus on ChatGPT? That's been mentioned a lot so far
Yeah.
this morning. Is that
Yeah.
the most popular and obvious
Yeah.
one to experiment with?
Yeah, so I'm not a salesman from OpenAI, firstly. I've said ChatGPT because of the stat that I gave, which was it's the fastest adopted technology in technology history, actually. Yes, there are other tools. Bard, a very good contender, which is not only on the context of the classic chat bot environment that you see in ChatGPT, but because many users like to use Google Drive for their docs, and suddenly it has the capability to connect into your reference materials or your documentation. So there's a lot of tools out there that have a certain uniqueness in there, and in terms of the language model as well. There are a lot of tools out there. I've just used ChatGPT as an example because of my the presentation.
It's just to say, it also, I think AI is such a big word that when you start talking about AI tools, you talk about anything. So things like Salesforce are now using AI tools to help you with everything that you using Salesforce for, which obviously extracting your own data, which is nice. Miro boards now have an AI tool to summarize your post notes in Miro board. So the chances are a lot of tools you're already using in your business have AI capabilities to some extent, which can also help with a agnostic board or a scared board. Kind of Jewish people that are sort of scared of this term AI. I take it on. AI doesn't have to mean ChatGPT.
No.
As I say, it can be extractive AI. It can be rules-based learning. I'm sure we've all been using rules-based learning in our businesses for years, for decades. That's been around for a really, really long time. That isn't being written with AI. So I think we get scared and get lost behind this massive label.
Yep.
But there are small things happening even day to day that you might not think about. It'd be a really nice way to introduce it to business.
Yeah.
Just come out cover it and say, actually, we've been doing this for a long time. We just been calling it something else.
Absolutely. I mean, AI has been around for a very, very long time, even right through back to the World War. So. Yes, it's not. It's just made a name for itself because certain technologies in the marketplace have actually made it accessible, super accessible and easy and free to see its value. There's going to be some other use cases in today's session. We'll talk about Microsoft Copilot. We'll talk about marketing as well, and we'll start to kind of unravel some of those different types of products that might exist and you could use.
A lot of why ChatGPT has become the phenomenon it is, and you're right, AI is an umbrella term for many, many different technologies. But it's actually specifically generative AI that I think is the thing that we're all really talking about. And I'll talk more about generative AI because that's the thing that, go back a year and a half-ish ago, became all of a sudden a tool that didn't exist before for the average consumer. But I think that's what we're all thinking about. But yes, AI is you probably interacted with AI 50 times already today in some way, shape or form. And your GPS, your sat nav, your predictive text on your phone, it's all been there for a long, long time.
Yep. Great, thank you all. I'm going to hand it over to, we have a little break, 10-minute break. We'll meet back here promptly at